Presented by Sunday Crunch is compiled today by Charlie Cooper. View in your browser. 3 things to know. 1. Brexit deal, 90% done. The finish line is in sight for Theresa May's negotiation with Brussels, at least insofar as the all-important withdrawal agreement is concerned. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney made some very positive noises in his morning interview with Sophy Ridge on Sky. For months now, the EU has been saying that 80% of the deal is done, so Coveney's statement that the figure is now 90%, while probably not strictly mathematical, is an important political signal from the EU to May that she is heading in the right direction. 10 days to save Brexit. Coveney's optimism seems to be centered on imminent new proposals from the UK. Regarding the Northern Ireland backstop, the legal guarantee that whatever happens in future trade talks, there will be no hard border on the island of Ireland. He said the two negotiating teams need to lock themselves in a room for the next 10 days or so, but expressed optimism a deal could be done, potentially even before the end of October. Watch. What's the new proposal? A combination of the UK's June proposal to remain in a de facto customs union, a temporary customs arrangement, for an indefinite period after the transition period ends in December 2020, combined with, most likely, as Politico reported last month, Northern Ireland remaining aligned with the EU on the regulation of some goods, chiefly in the agricultural sector, and that therefore some extra checks will be required between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Wednesday is a big Brexit day in Brussels, with key committee Corporate Article 50 due to meet, and EU Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier attending the European Commission's College of Commissioners meeting. He's also set to give a speech at the European Parliament of Enterprises event. Also expecting progress, the British cabinet. The Sunday Times says it spoke to 18 cabinet ministers at the Conservative Party conference this past week, and every one of them said that May would get a deal and MPs would then end up approving it. Not happy, Brexiteer MPs, as usual, although one of them, Bernard Jenkin, says the Sunday Times report claiming they might vote down the budget is wide of the mark. One of the journalists who wrote the story, Tim Shipman, tweeted a lengthy defense of the reporting, saying he doesn't ever make up stories and that the antics of this government and its backbenchers mean there is never any need to do so. Meanwhile, the Sunday Telegraph reports that the Brexiteer Collective European Research Group are prepared to accept EU officials at some UK ports to help solve the Irish border conundrum, which might give May a sliver more wriggle room. Remember, agreeing a Northern Ireland backstop is the biggest hurdle in the way of a deal. But getting agreement with Brussels is just stage 1. May has to sell the plan to her MPs, including 10 Democratic Unionist Party MPs whose leaders are set against any new checks on trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Fudge alert, Coveney also appeared to signal that the other key aspect of the Brexit deal that MPs will vote on, the political declaration on the future relationship, might not be as detailed as some might want. Nobody is talking about signing off on the future relationship and all of the detail of what the trading environment will look like, he told Sophy Ridge. Cue warnings of a blind Brexit, from Nicola Sturgeon and others. Either way, it's likely that the EU will restate its rejection of May's Chequers plan for the future relationship this week, but remember, it's the backstop that matters right now in terms of getting a deal done. 2. SNP back second referendum on EU. Another significant, if not unexpected, Brexit moment this morning was when SNP leader and Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon told Andrew Marr on the BBC that if MPs end up rejecting May's Brexit deal, and there comes a vote on a second referendum, her party would back it. Watch. 3. Universal credit must go. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell committed news on Ridge's Sky Show, going beyond current Labour policy to say that the government's universal credit scheme, rolling all welfare payments into one, while cutting the overall budget, will have to go. No word on what Labour's replacement would be, but the party seems keen to move on this politically following this week's revelations in the Times that the next phase of the scheme's rollout could see millions of families losing up to £200 a month. This is a big crisis brewing for the Tories. May reaches out. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has a column in the left Liberal Observer newspaper, making a direct appeal to Labour supporters to look at my government afresh. A political leader suggesting those who voted for the other party might want to change their mind isn't exactly out of the ordinary. But the paper's front-page treatment and May's words, continuing a theme that she hit on in her conference speech, tell us a little bit about which direction she wants to be seen taking the Tories. Key quote, millions of people who have supported Labour all their lives are appalled by what has happened to a once great party under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. I want voters who may previously have thought of themselves as Labour supporters to look at my government afresh. They will find a decent, moderate and patriotic program that is worthy of their support. ****, a message from BP. Tomorrow we're launching an exciting new partnership with the Science Museum. Read how together we plan to tackle the UK's STEM shortage. ****, the Andrew Marr Show guests, Scottish First Minister and SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon, Lloyd's Chief Executive Officer Inga Beale, Conservative Party Chairman Brandon Lewis, and reviewing the papers, BBC Scotland editor Sarah Smith, talk radio presenter John Nicholson, and Open Europe think tank director Henry Newman. Transcript. SNP Brexit. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon had made billing on Marr, confirming what many had predicted, that her party would, undoubtedly, back a second referendum option were it on the table. She warned that the country could face what she called a frying pan or fire situation if MPs were left with a choice between May's deal, which she predicted would be a blind Brexit, with key elements undecided on exit day, and no deal. Key quote, I think that is almost as unacceptable as no deal at all. It would continue all of the uncertainty that businesses are facing now, and the cliff edge we are facing now we would simply face again in 2020. Indie Ref 2, on the question of the other second referendum, on Scottish independence, Sturgeon once again played for time, committing to set out next steps only after the end of this stage of the Brexit negotiations, meaning we may have an answer after March 2019 next year. Lloyds Bank, Brussels, Chief Executive Officer of City of London giant Lloyds, Inga Beale, updated Marr on the firm's plan to open a subsidiary in Brussels which, she said, could take up the contracts of EU-based customers and policyholders in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Key quote, Lloyds' heart is in London, but 15% of the business Lloyds does comes from the EU market. Post-Brexit we won't have the ability to continue to offer insurance just from London as before, so we're opening a subsidiary in Brussels. It's something we've been forced to do. Watch. Ending austerity. Tory party chairman Brandon Lewis delivered a masterclass in speaking out loud while saying absolutely nothing. In an interview made up almost entirely of platitudes, he declined to outline in any detail what May's announcement of the end of austerity would mean for future policy, but did point to two existing policies that signal the future direction: this week's announcement on lifting the cap on council borrowing to fund house building, and the funding boost for the NHS announced earlier this year. He also said universal credit is here to stay. Watch. ****, a message from BP. We have supported UK education for 50 years as part of our contribution to UK. And tomorrow this extends to an innovative new partnership with the Science Museum. Find out more here. ****, Ridge on Sunday guests, Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney, Digital Secretary Jeremy Wright, Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, former head of MI6 Richard Dearlove, and SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford. Transcript. Irish border. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney expressed high hopes for a Brexit deal that he said would have to be politically saleable in Britain and politically acceptable in the EU. On the all-important Northern Ireland backstop, he said, I believe we are going to see some new thinking. The sooner we see that the better, so we can assess it, and added that Dublin wanted to be as constructive as we can be. Respect for May. There were more warm words for the Prime Minister herself. Addressing the humiliation meted out to May at the Salzburg summit, Coveney was recalcitrant. Nobody wants to humiliate anybody here. Theresa May has a lot of respect across the EU. She has a lot of respect in Ireland because she has faced down many people in the British political system who don't want to prioritise the issues of Ireland and Northern Ireland, he said. SNP conference, against a backdrop of new polls, one commissioned by the party, and one in the Sunday Times, suggesting support for Scottish independence could grow after Brexit. Ian Blackford, speaking from Glasgow, drove home the SNP's line that May must keep the UK in the European Customs Union and single market, and said he believed this would have majority support in the House of Commons. On the option of a second EU referendum, if May's deal fails, however, he sounded positively Labour-like. All options will be on the table. His leader was more explicit on they'll vote for a second referendum. In ref 2, when it comes to the point that we know the Brexit destination, then we can have that discussion with the people of Scotland. Watch. Dearlove on Russia. Former MI6 chief Richard Dearlove told Ridge that while we all need to be vigilant about the threat from Russia, we are no longer in the Cold War. I don't see that the threat that Russia presents now as equivalent to the situation that we had during the Cold War. On Corbyn, Dearlove was scathing about Corbyn aide Andrew Murray's suggestion that a deep state is working against the Labour leader, branding it rubbish. However, he added, someone coming from my background is troubled by Jeremy Corbyn's past associations, some of which I find surprising and worrying. He's enthusiastically associated himself with groups and interests that I would not say are friends of the British nation. McDonnell hits back. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell had an immediate response, appearing on the same show, calling Dearlove a reactionary member of the establishment, and urging him to spend his retirement in quiet contemplation of the role that he played with regard to the Iraq War, pointing out criticisms of the intelligence services in the Chilcot inquiry into the war. On May's end of austerity, McDonnell was also bullish. They've announced it 3 times already and it's not happened. On universal credit, it's not sustainable anymore. It will have to go, he said. To have a government minister being privately briefed that families are going to lose £200 a month. These are some of our poorest families. It's got to go. Culture Secretary Twitter. Meanwhile, Jeremy Wright, the digital secretary, also made a warning about Russia, saying we should all be a bit more skeptical about what we read on the internet, about what we see, and be more skeptical about where it might be coming from. When asked why he, with responsibility for the digital strategy, is so shy on Twitter, he was amusingly defensive. When people say you're not in Twitter, what they actually mean is not, we can't see what you're doing on Twitter. What they really mean, are you prepared to have a row with people you've never met on Twitter? And the answer is no. I think there are better things I can do with my time. PNR's politics guests, Europe Minister Alan Duncan, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury Peter Dowd, SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown, and on the panel, Telegraph Senior Political Correspondent Kate McCann, Financial Times Political Correspondent Laura Hughes, and comedian Andy Hamilton. A freer, happier May, that's what we'd have, if only it wasn't for Brexit, so said Europe Minister Alan Duncan on John Pinar's BBC Radio 5 show. If she were free of the shackles of Brexit, she'd very much come into her own and we'd see a different and freer and happier Theresa May, who I think would be able to achieve a lot on the domestic agenda, he said. On Brexit, I'm very hopeful that come the end of 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it is, that we will have a deal, Labour and Brexit. Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury Peter Dowd outlined in slightly more detail than we've heard before what the likely outcome would be if May's Brexit deal is voted down, which in turn leads to an election, and a Labour government takes office. The answer, more negotiations, which would take as long as they take. Key quote, if we don't like the deal and we vote against it, there's a general election, and a Labour government in place, then of course, we try to renegotiate that deal. It's patently obvious there would be a period of time where that deal would need to be renegotiated. Sunday papers, click on the publication's name to see its front page. Sunday Express, outrageous. Albanian convicted of murder commits serious crimes in UK. The Independent, keep full access to single market. Voters tell May Mail on Sunday, Billy, I'll become a stem cell guinea pig. Sunday Mirror, please jail our son. 14 The Observer, May bids for centre ground with appeal to Labour voters. The Sunday Telegraph, Brexiteers offer olive branch over ports. The Sunday Times. UK Wargames cyber attack on Moscow week ahead. Sunday conferences, Scottish National Party conference underway in Glasgow, from 2 p.m. local time. Monday Parliament, still in recess until Tuesday. Brexit, EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier visits Italy, meeting Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, timing TBC. Tuesday Brexit, Michel Barnier meets Democratic Unionist Party leader Arlene Foster and MEP Diane Dodds, timing TBC. Migration, Chair of Independent Government's Independent Migration Advisory Committee, Alan Manning, at House of Commons Home Affairs Select Committee, 2:00 p.m. Local time. Conferences, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon addresses SNP conference in Glasgow, 3:15 p.m. local time. Defense Ministry's Permanent Secretary Stephen Lovegrove at House of Commons Defense Committee on Spending and Annual Report, 2:30 p.m. local time. Wednesday Barnier, EU Chief Negotiator meets College of Commissioners and addresses European Parliament of Enterprises event, timing TBC. Brexit, Economic Secretary to the Treasury John Glenn at House of Lords EU Financial Affairs Subcommittee, 10:00 a.m. Local time. PMQs, Theresa May in the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions, 12 p.m. local time. Brexit, National Audit Office Auditor General Amy Morse and think tank chiefs at House of Commons Brexit Committee, 9:15 a.m. local time. Police Chief Constables, Crime Commissioners, Chief Inspector of Constabulary and Home Office Permanent Secretary at House of Commons Public Accounts Committee on Police Force Finances, 2:30 p.m. local time. Brexit, Ministers Suella Braverman and Robin Walker at House of Commons Procedure Committee on Scrutiny of Delegated Legislation, 2:45 p.m. local time. Parliament, Leader of the House of Commons Andrea Leadsom at Finance Committee on Restoration of the Palace of Westminster, 3 p.m. Local time. Brexit, Pharmaceutical, Haulage, Retail and Small Business Representatives at House of Commons Brexit Committee, 3:00 p.m. Local time. Thursday Northern Ireland, House of Lords debate on Brexit and the Good Friday Agreement, timing TBC recommended reads Poland, at odds with EU allies, has a new foreign policy, writes Politico's Paul Taylor, America First. But how dependable a guarantor will Donald Trump be against the Russian security threat? Brexit, Trump, Matteo Salvini, surely we're at the high watermark of national populism? Nope, there's more to come, argues Matthew Goodwin in The New Statesman. Speaking of which, if you still haven't gotten to know Trump's all-important base yet, ahead of the midterm elections and with 2020 looming on the horizon, read Politico's profile of his biggest fan, 72-year-old Lynette Villano from Pennsylvania. Sunday Crunch is compiled by Tom McTague, Charlie Cooper and Annabelle Dixon. We'd love to hear what you think. Drop us a note at tmctalk@politico.co.uk, see Cooper at politico.co.uk, at Exon at politico.co.uk. If you were forwarded this message by a friend, you can subscribe here. You can unsubscribe there too. Subscribe to the Politico newsletter family, Brussels Playbook, London Playbook, EU Confidential, Sunday Crunch, Brussels Influence, DC Playbook, all our Politico pro-policy morning newsletters.